What's good with the YouTube? Real Talk with Flacco. This is Flacco himself coming live and direct. And as you know, on this platform, we dive into sensitive issues, delicate matters regarding prison, community, gangs, recidivism, and addiction. And tonight, I got special guests, as always, my co-host, Toko. And I got the homie Hangout over there, man. Subscribe to the homies Hangout channel. He got a lot of good content, man. And so today, what we're going to be discussing as far as with all three of us is the NUESTRA RAZA. Norteño, Soldado, whatever you want to call it, the different structure, different terminologies, and so forth, man. And all three of us had a long, extensive career as structure members or NR members, hermanos, bros, whatever. You know, I still traditionally like the term hermano or bro. You know what I'm saying? I still was using that up to like the 2000s. You know what I mean? But how you guys doing?
Doing good, man. Good to happy to be here.
Yeah, doing good.
Okay. So I guess we'll do a little brief history, and you know, like I always tell people, there's always maybe some misconceptions of certain parts. So if there's any parts that you guys heard different, please correct me on it. I mean, feel free to take the liberty to say, "Hey, hold on, I heard this." The time frame within the Norteño movement, there's different time frames of when it started, as we know. To my best recollection, it all kind of started when the MA started to organize a lot of Southerners down at Los Angeles County Jail and put the false propaganda out there that the NFs were Norteños and their targets were people from down south. Therefore, from my understanding, they started to organize the Sureños a little bit and created them, and they started to do their own bidding. Around that time, there was talks between Babo and other people to start a sub-faction called RAZA Unida, which was supposed to be that because they still wanted to recruit from down south. But this was in response to the MAs addressing the Sureños. I actually talked to someone named Bumpers from Santa Barbara who pretty much laced me down because he was in discussions with Babo about creating that movement. It didn't go through. So there's going to be different things about when the bonds and formats were pretty much put out there. The first Norteño, you know, it's going to be in the range of 79 to 1980 is going to be my best guess from all the case scratches I heard. But at that time around the 80s, right, they started to slam down the Garnales a lot more harsher, especially in DVI, San Quentin, and so forth. They were in lockdown units, kind of like the whole, but they had a little bit more wiggle room. But Tracy had overturned at that time. And it had became more of a Sureño stronghold at that time for a minute. And there was a lot of Northerners that were out there on those yards, Norteños at that time. And this is when you had an individual, you know, from my understanding, Hobo was in charge of both the UCs and undercover canals in the Norteño Soldados. And he had put Ricardo London in charge of that specifically, okay, because of their relation. And Ricardo London was actually not a C or a head mono, which is a trip. He was an advisor. He was part of a lot of revolutionary groups, a savage, a beast with it, and very intelligent from what they say. So from the beginning, from that standpoint, there was no NR, no RAZA, or nothing. They were in the works of putting this together. They had a policy in DVI at that time. I think it was a 60-day or 90-day policy that you had to get off as Norteño. They were coming to the hole. They were getting laced up by the C's. They were taking certain parts of their educational formats, and they were teaching these Norteños how to make weapons, how to establish a yard, so forth. And the bonds were starting to be created. And from my understanding, that before there was ever a structure or bonds or formats that came out of New Folsom, that they were being classified as the XIV structure of Norteños already. XIV symbolizing the 14 bonds that they had already kind of adapted at that time, structure that they were organized, and Norteños that being from up north. So from that time forward, things started to change. They started to put everything into formats and so forth. You had Corny from Woodland, Copas from Salas, Brown Bob, and you also had some other supporters that also were influential, like Black Bob and Manos from Santa Barbara, believe it or not. And the date that you guys hear is January 22nd, 1984. And that's to pay tribute to Paulo de Sacra, who died, was the first casualty in New Folsom who was killed by a gunner. So they gave the honorary date of January 22nd, 84 to acknowledge the structure, Nuestra Raza, whatever you want to call it at that time. But from my understanding, they started to really push that around 83 is when everything was pretty much put out there and put into effects. And some of the first individuals to put out the bonds and formats and to start recruiting structure members were Sheldon Villanueva, Skip, and Dancing Bear. Now, Skip was recruited instantly when he came from Hawaii as a Garnal. He was recruited by Chente Orojo and Pinky Hernandez, but he was labeled as an undercover. And the purpose for that was for him to go out there and be able to recruit into this new structure. Okay. And as we know from there, things started to kind of elevate the structure. The NR label, from my understanding, did not really take full till about 92, from my understanding. Because at the end of the format, as you guys know, it says NUESTRA RAZA. And that's when different changes started to come about. Because before that, they used to have like a CAT system, a CAT 1, CAT 2, and CAT 3. CAT 1, a beginning member that was just recruited. A CAT 2, more elevated leadership role. And a CAT 3 was basically an undercover carnal at that time. They used to employ a lot of UCs. And but they didn't have no checks and balances. People were just getting recruited. You know, the OE of the R would be the one that would sanction their status. It didn't have to be authorized by a C, and they couldn't really, you know, verify certain CAT statuses with individuals. There was no like vote or no process or nothing like that. So they came up with a new system around 92 with the NUESTRA RAZA, which consisted of the NUESTRA RAZA Council, NUESTRA RAZA administrators, NRTs, and so forth. And the NRC was basically the ones that were passing all directives for the NR movement. And the administrators were in each block in the Bay. This was a chain of command for Pelican Bay, but it was also classified as headquarters for all the hermanos. So usually what they would try to do was they would try to link you with a channel to one of the NRAs. Therefore, you get all directives to keep that branch and union going. And from there, you had on the NRC was Lalo from, what's that, Parole? Is that how you say it?
Parole.
Parole, right?
I'm not sure.
Because you see up north, it's Parlier, an individual named Lalo, and also Pizza. Okay, Pizza. You know what I mean? As we already know who that is from Stockton. Mm-hmm. They were two members on the council, but they were also both undercover carnals, from my understanding. And that was so that the NF still had its tight knit mitts on what the NR was doing. As we know from years later, the dismantling happened. There's a lot of different reasons why. You know, the NR really became stronger in numbers. They actually had their own regiments out there on the streets. A lot of people that had positions of authority at said prisons were trying to establish things to take care of that prison. It wasn't mandatory to function, though, at that time. You know, there was a time when I think 60 days you had to assist but not function. And you just could do what you wanted to do as far as trying to reach back. But, you know, from there you come into the stages of what you have today now, which is these soldados. And, you know, this is what we're going to be going about. I want to talk about, before we go forward, I want to ask you guys, is there any corrections in what I said? Anything that you guys may have heard different?
No, there's some new information in there, but
Parlier. I didn't know he was from Parlier.
Yeah. Well, that's I have that information from I've seen the whole old documentation of all the NR members and stuff that were on at that time. You know, you guys were both NR members. You know what I mean? What is your personal feelings is what I want to go into as far as all the changes. Like, for me, I'm gonna say what I felt the NR member was. You know, I'm not gonna talk about the O. The O created it. That was a whole different type of experience. The NR to me was about protectors of the people. We were the forefront. We were the ones that were securing, educating, establishing for the betterment of our people, so they could have a place to go to where they could do their time and take advantage of the privileges and incentives. We were the ones pushing the prison politics. We were the ones that were ready to sacrifice. We were the ones that were organizing everything on behalf of the people. That's my personal perspective of how I felt the NR was at one time. Like, we were believers. We lived and died for that shit. You know what I'm saying? Doing the fucking patrols and fucking having the keister shit all the time. And while other homeboys were over there playing basketball and working out, we had to go out there and handle business. You know, it was a whole, it was stressful at times. I mean, I know you guys know it was stressful. You know what I mean? There was nothing easy in being an NR member back then.
Yeah, not at all, man. That's why it wasn't for everybody. You know, that you had an opportunity, from what I remember, going back to me, especially me not being Latino or Raza by blood, me being Tongan and Samoan, but being from Sanjo and then being a homeboy, then catching a case, then going in, you know, as far as the O went and as far as the structure went, that's all I knew. I knew it by name. As you remember, Flacco, I got tried as an adult from 92 went to juvenile hall, and as soon as I turned 18 a week later, they walked me across the streets of the old jail. Then I got sentenced in 93. They just told me, you act like a youngster, you're going to get treated like one. You know, conducting, you're going to go to Quentin, this is what's going to happen. But there was no HHPs back then. There was no rundown on what a C or a B was. I learned all that, man, in reception, you know. And then when I started understanding more and seeing how the homeboys were more organized, and they were from everywhere, not just San Jose. There was people I was meeting from all over the place. You know, I kind of felt, once I started finding out the information, you know, and I started to see that it's got nothing to do with being Mexican. Yeah, the majority are Mexicanos or Chicanos, but if you're a believer, that's when those concepts started coming to me. True believer, the cause, what the cause meant to me. And to me, those beginning, when you talk about the beginning stages, I'll speak for myself. It was the teachers and the sponsors that I had, what made me even want to take the next step. You know what I mean? Everybody else around me that were raising their hands, talking about their hoods, and they were big and bad and this and that. You know what I mean? And it's not me hating, it's a reality. Those dudes that came off big and bad, what you did on the street didn't mean shit. At least when I was there. You know what I'm saying? If you were acting all wild and this and that, the older home, you know what I mean? Now that looking back on it, you know, the couple C's that were there at Cuimas and the rest of them were B's, they seen that, man, and they chewed you up. I mean, they didn't disrespect you, but they just said, okay, and any little movida, whatever it is, man, you know what I mean? And you get rolled up or you do whatever, and then they never come back because, you know what I mean, it's too much. And then when the Huilas go out, you know, I got involved in an incident that I didn't even know about. It was a haircut on the upper yard, and some dude that was no good from Mountain View got whacked. And so everybody that was in that vicinity, we got rolled up into the hole. And I just, from my own constitution, I just kept my mouth shut, you know, and I got rolled in with Gibby and all those other cats. And thus that became my, you know, me being only 18, 19, turned 19 and quitting that summer, and how I conducted and carried myself, that was attracted to these dudes. And the fact that when SSU tried to jam me up, when you go to the hole, right, to find out what, I didn't say nothing. And Miranda, I don't know if you guys remember him.
Yeah.
Hey, man, he fucking, pardon my French, man, but he you talk about disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Toko Uso, man, what if the Frisco boy, you know what I mean? You know, got a lot of, I said, man, I'm not from the city. What about SOA? If they find out, man, you know, and I just sat there in chains in the yellow jumpsuit, like, you know what I mean? I don't know what you did. I remember everybody that was there, the staff got uncomfortable and they just wrote it up as, you know what I mean, as a Northern sympathizer, right? No validation really back then. And so he just says, all right, well, you want to be Mexican? I'm going to put you down as that. From now on, you ain't another. You're classified as a Northern Hispanic. Fuck on. And then I came back, the paperwork went through, and the hermanos that I didn't know that were hermanos at that time, you know, Gibby from Modesto, they ended up eventually schooling me, seeing all that, and then right away, you know what I mean, they know who's telling and who's not, right? Youngsters or whatever. And then from that on, hey, you know what? That's when I got the name Toko, and that's when they just started lacing me up. And then I got asked the question when the Huilas came through, you know what I mean? Hey, you know, you ever heard of the structure? Well, it's now called the NR, you know what I mean? Then you put Nuestra Familia, now it's Nuestra Raza. I'm thinking, oh, fuck, you know what I mean? What's this? But how he explained it, and how he, kind of like when Rascal did his spill about, you know what I mean, when he was in Corcoran, how, you know, like it was just how Homeboy got at him when he was a celly, you know, you hear certain things, and then he meets Rascal and he's like, fuck, man, you know what I mean? This dude's willing to learn. And it was the same thing. A lot of people, man, he's a fucking youngster. He's a first termer. He's doing 7 years. You know, he's not even Mexican, that's it. You know, they would tease me. They didn't mean that, but they teased me. But Gibby just seen right there, you know, he just knew. I don't want to say he baited me, but he made me thirsty. He's like, read this, you know what I mean? And we come out tomorrow, work out. Tell me what you think.
Them lugs, huh?
And then I would see how he wrote Rascal and Flacco, and then I would mimic that. I'm like, you know what? I got some verbiage. I was good at English. The homeboys made fun of me when I was at Independence High School, but I got A's on my paper. So you see the dude, and then you read what I'm like, fuck, man, this dude's fuck. It's like college, you know? And then I just took to it. And then the rest was history after that. You know what I mean? It was just really, it was a lot of writing. It was a lot of, and then the, you know, the commitment, and then you get the sponsor, and then Gibby comes back. Hey, you know what I mean? You're ready for your indoctrination. And to me, fucking 19 going on 20 on my way to Corcoran, and you hear those words. I don't know about you, Flacco and Rascal, but I never felt important in my life. I never felt like I fit in because my last name, look at my fucking last name, Manu Mana Maluna, right? What the fuck are you? What the fuck is a Tongan? What the fuck is a Samoan? Why are you running with us? It's because you embrace me, you know what I mean? And the homeboys would always stick up for me on the streets, and then I held my own. But then once I got in there, fuck, the love I got. That's why I always say I'm more privy, and not, you know, and I'm from Sanjo to the heart, but it wasn't the Sanjo car that embraced me. Salas and the Central Valle. They taught me the verbiage. They taught me how to conduct and carry myself, and they treated me like I was fucking from there. But it just, it was the carnalismo. Hey, you know, you're bro, you know what I mean? And we follow the brother's lead, man. And, you know, hey, we do our thing. And when we need assistance, you know what I mean? We just make sure the casa's clean, you know? And then that was it. And then, however, it was after that, I learned that depending upon what yard you were on is the klesha that you got. If you were low in numbers, I would hear from other hermanos that would come through Corcoran or Solano. Solano was where everybody wanted to get, because back then it was supposed to be kickback. That was we ran that whole facility, and then it would be more of just we could do our time and work and do whatever. But you're in places like, you know, Corco, and you go further south, or you go to certain places at level 4, and then you're like Rascal was talking about. You know, I mean, Boo Boo would tell me he gets somewhere, and you got to find out if these homeboys are solid or not, what kind of yard this is.
Yeah.
You got to put your training in to establish, okay, am I going to take off, or are they going to be with me? You know, and I'm glad I never was in those situations. Yeah, the removals and the stabbings, you know, on the yard. And then, you know, I mean, after that, I got sent to the SHU, and it wasn't until a few years after that when they really started pushing that validation in the late 90s is when you did it. But they weren't indeterminate, at least for Bs yet. You know what I mean? But once the 2000s came, fuck, they were fucking slamming Norteños down, giving them indeterminate shoes too. You know, so that's a little bit of when you talked about that, the little history of it that brought up to me was the attraction rather than the promotion, because I didn't know nothing about the familia or you know the abbreviations and stuff like that. But you learn the overall authority, the RC, this, that, your tier security. You get these responsibilities, man, and if you don't have the mind for it, you're gonna be like, I'm just gonna do my thing. You know, you do, and I just felt like I was a part of something. I believed in the movement. And and the one key thing, I don't know if you guys heard this, but for me, I was told to me, you know, because I didn't really have any tattoos. I had 4 dots, and I'm just like, fuck, you know what I mean? And I was talking with another homie when we got indoctrinated, another B from Modesto. He's like, you know, I should get a big ass norteño across my stomach now. And then I remember a couple of older Bs were just like, not a norteño no more, bro. You're NUESTRA RAZA. We don't play, you know what I mean? It ain't gonna be. He goes, Toco is the smart one. You know what I mean? And then after that, I got fucking NUESTRA, you know, they got me drunk, and I got fucking NUESTRA RAZA and calligraphy across my fucking back. And then I pulled a boxer once it was all over. As soon as I got out, covered with an Aztec fucking eagle. You know what I mean? But that's just how it was. It was just, and you know, I'm not trying to, for the viewers, I'm not trying to glamorize it. I'm just, like I've told you before, Flacco, and I'll say it now that Rascal's here. When I say these things, I have to show, or I believe we have to show why we were there in the first place. You have to, you know what I mean? There's got to be a reason why we did the things that we did and why we believed. So
NUESTRA RAZA had a purpose, bro. I really believe that, man. It really had a purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, I still like the core beliefs that we're talking. And I'm gonna say something that the viewers may not know this. I've dropped lugs before, but I was striving when I hit the system. When I met fucking the man Rascal right here, the homie Hangout.
Right.
Rascal laced me up on a lot of shit at CLAs. I'm gonna tell you guys right now. You guys don't know how much stuff I learned from the man. Certain things that, you know, the art of a warrior and stuff like that, and the 5 Ps, and you know, knowledge is control, controls, all that stuff. I learned from this man. Things I use later on in my career and stuff as my I emulated into other individuals and adapted it in my way. Rascal had a big influence on my career, believe it or not. So I want to hear from Rascal now because he was a strong pushing NUESTRA member as well.
Yeah, I excuse me. I appreciate that. I'm more appreciative that you're not in prison. So you know that's good. And Toko, yeah, I can relate to a lot of that. I similar, a little bit different. When I went through San Quentin, there wasn't really any schooling. I got disciplined and had to write an essay, and I wrote it out like line by line on some binder paper. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they were like, "What the fuck is this? It's all big. It's an essay. What do you want?" You know. They were like, "No, mini writing." I was like, "Okay," you know. But they, you know, the dude who had the keys in Carson section, you know, he disappeared one night, right? And so, you know, different things were going on, right? And so, I didn't get a lot of education there in terms of technical schooling or proper schooling, right? I got education about being in prison, sort of, right? And you know, basic HHP type stuff, which I wasn't familiar with before. I was in a county that didn't really have a strong program, and so basically I was just fighting woods and on one occasion Southsiders the whole time I was there, you know, and so it was fun, right? Like it, you know, there was no, I mean, there was politics, I guess, you know, but not like what we see in prison. And so I went to Solano. That was my first main line. And I was asked if I wanted to participate in education. And I said, sure. And I've said this before, a lot of people know, you know, I never graduated 7th grade. I got my GED when I was in a program, a quarter-pointed program later. But through technical school, I never went to high school. When I was old enough to go to school, I was on the streets for part of that time, and I would go to like my brother's school and my sister's school and go fool around, but I wasn't in class. And so, but I had always liked to read and write, and just growing up as a juvenile and being in the system so much, that was what I did, right? You know, we didn't have TVs, we didn't have all that stuff, so I just read, and that really helped my writing. So anyways, this guy says, hey man, you want to participate in schooling? Of course, right? Like to me, it wasn't a question. And in my mind, it's because I'm here and I'm a homeboy, and I really felt like I was gonna be in prison forever, right? I had a 10-year sentence, and I was 19 years old, and so in my mind, you know, we used to call Buck Rogers Day, right? People was like, "Oh man, that's a Buck Rogers Day," and in the 90s, when you talked about the 2000s, man, it seemed like it was a light years away, and so I was like, "Man, I'm gonna wind up getting in trouble, you know, and just staying here," and so I wanted to learn what it was about, right? I figured if I'm gonna be here, and I had started getting a sense just in the first couple of days that they're more like, this isn't just a whole lot of gangbanging, right? Like there's Southsiders over there, there's Northern over here, there's Woods over there, there's Blacks over there, some of these subgroups, and there's something to this, right? But I don't know what it is. And so when the opportunity for schooling came, I was all on board, of course. And I remember the first essay that I was asked to write was on the topic of security, right? What is security to you? And man, I wrote a huge essay, right? Mini writing this time. I was doing 5 lines in a line, right? And I talked about all the kinds of security I could think of. You know what I mean? Like emotional security, financial security, physical security, the security of self versus security of the collective.
Yeah.
Securing your physical environment, right? Securing the prison. And I didn't have a lot of answers necessarily for those things. It was more just an acknowledgement of these are the types of security, and here's a couple of the things that I can think of that I think would help somebody be secure, right? And I turned in the essay, and I actually got in trouble the next morning for a couple of reasons, but the main one was, you know, they had asked me, have you received any schooling? And I said no, and that was the truth. And then they read my essay and they're like, nah, bro, you're lying. You've been schooled. Why are you lying? You're undercover this, you're this. And I didn't know what they were talking about. And I was kind of nervous, like, fuck, man, I feel like I just did something really wrong. But I feel like all I did was do what I was asked to do. So I'm not sure here. And, you know, and so it took some convincing, right? And they saw me some more topics and I wrote some more essays, and that's kind of how it went, right? And then at some point, the schooling had stopped, right? They were like, oh, like I did the format, right? And I had done tons of topics, and I wasn't getting any more homework, you know? Like, it was cool, I was on the yard, but I wasn't getting homework. And I was like, what's going on? Like, why did schooling stop? And so that's when I was approached shortly afterwards, like, hey, you want more schooling? Yeah. You know, I've learned a lot, but I know there's got to be more than this. You know what I mean? And so they said, well, that schooling comes with responsibility and obligation. Okay. You know, let's do that then. You know, it wasn't some deep thing. It wasn't some soul searching thing. I was a kid that was striving. I wasn't striving to be famous. I wasn't striving to, you know, whack the most people and run around, you know, kind of like Toko was mentioning, some folks running around and this. I always did what was asked. I was always down for whatever. And you know, that had been tested at some point, right? And I was fine with that. But I wanted to be the best homeboy I could be. And I figured the only way I could be the best homeboy I could be is if I learned everything there is to learn about being a homeboy, right? And so it's as I started learning more, right? So I get pulled. My sponsor locks it up, goes to work in the kitchen. Maquillo from Salas, not the famous one, but Maquillo from Salas. You know, he went to work in the kitchen, didn't come back. And so, but I got good schooling. I did not get good examples, right? But I got good schooling, and I got in trouble on that yard for applying what schooling I did have. You know, there was somebody that had come on the yard from San Jose, and I forget all the details, man. And I was gonna break this down when I did my spill on Solano, but I forget all the details. But for some reason or another, he was kind of pushed to the side, right? Of okay, fine. You know, and it's not because he had any dirt on his jacket or anything. I don't remember why, but basically he was like left alone. But he's still labeled as a Northerner. He's still shelled up with a Northerner. He's still on our side of the yard, right? And I had been learning the format and stuff, and so I was like, I'm gonna embrace this guy, right? Because that's what we do. You know what I mean? I'm gonna embrace him and show him love and show him respect, man, because ain't nothing wrong with the guy. You know, and he's been pushed to the side, and I don't feel that that's the right approach. So I'm not gonna push back against the leadership. I'm just gonna act my own way towards him. I'm gonna mess with him because I don't feel like we should not mess with him. You know. So then I start getting in trouble. Why are you talking to that dude? Why not?
He's a strangler.
He's not welcome. Then remove him, right? Like, but he's here. Yeah, but we don't mess with him. Why? He's not one of us. What is he? Again, like, remove him, right? If it's that big a deal, get him off the yard. But if he's on the yard, I feel it's my place to respect and acknowledge him. You know what I mean? And it was, man, I wish I could remember, but I'm gonna have to call some folks that I was in Solana with and ask them. They'll probably remember. But it wound up being a big dust up, man. And I wound up getting into an argument with the dude who had the keys to the yard because I was telling the bros on the yard, according to my schooling, I'm doing the right thing. And so that's why I'm doing it. And they're like, nah, bro, but there's stuff you don't know. Well, is the stuff I don't know different than the stuff I do know? Like, does it make what I know now obsolete? Because that's a weird way to teach somebody. Like, you teach them the wrong way before you teach them the right way. That doesn't make sense. Well, no. And I had kind of out-talked, but not like some master verbal skills, just logic. So they were all kind of stuck and couldn't argue with me. And they were like, you need to go talk to T. And I was like, cool. So I sat down with T and he's like, what you talking about? And I told him. And I don't remember which ones he said, but he's like, do you know what bond such and such says? No, I ain't seen the bonds. Do you know what bond so-and-so says? I haven't seen the bonds, which was true. Okay, so then you don't know what you're talking about, and how dare you're questioning my authority. That's one he mentioned. In bond 5, and you question my authority. Bro, I'm operating based on what I know, based on what you people have taught me. If I'm missing something, teach me what I'm missing. And so that kind of had me in hot water, but also I think attracted people to me because I stand on what I believe, right? And not because I didn't want status. I didn't want to be famous. I just wanted to be the best homeboy I could be.
Yeah.
You know? And being a homeboy was very important to me. I was a homeboy. Like it that's what I was. So I want to be the best one I can be. Not to impress people, but to make us as strong as we can be. And if we're only as strong as our weakest link, I don't want to be that weakest link. You know what I'm saying? And so I wind up getting schooled. And same thing, similar Toko, where you're not a gang member anymore, right? You're a part of something bigger. And man, that shit had me hook, line, and sinker, bro. Yeah. Like that was right up my alley.
Yeah, you should have seen him operate. He used to love the fucking prison politics. He'd be going over there talking to the Sudanos. He'd be over there talking to the Africanos. He'd be over there dealing with this issues. He was pretty good, man.
Yeah,
I agree. That was one of the best things.
I was
professionalism and the politics. Yeah. You were able to. I was always curious about the Southsiders. Well, when we grew up, it was upstaters. That's the new name. But these vatos down there were just like us.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it ain't me jumping on the bandwagon. I'm a human being now, and they're men. I got a lot of camaradas. Like I told Flaco that. I was in a homeboy from an ex homeboy from that way. Mm-hmm. I was in his wedding from La Puente, but so I loved it just like Rascal did. I totally agree with that.
I mean, Rascal's the only hermano I ever met that tried to recruit a Southsider as a bro.
I did. My neighbor. And
that was ropes, right?
If they wouldn't have blocked me, if the leadership on the yard wouldn't have told me to stop, I think there was a chance. But and I was super excited because I had just learned about this, right? I had learned about undercovers, and I had learned that, other group segments in the sense of like, hey, Southsiders, they're not our enemy, right? They're only in opposition to the extent that they're doing the bidding of their big homies, right? But as individuals, nah, they we don't get down like that, and we treat them with respect, right? And we treat them with a level of carnelismo, and perhaps in doing so attract them to our philosophy and our way of operating, right? Because we are for the betterment of everybody, and blah 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 blah, right? So, and so that's what had me, and to be honest, it wasn't stressful for me. There was moments, right? There was times of stress and anxiety, but but I really experienced what stress was when I left that yard.
Salinas Valley, yep.
Right? And pulled up to B Yard in Salinas Valley, which, you know, was not a friendly place for us to be, right? And then from there, you know, going to the hole off that yard and then going to another yard and being given huge responsibility. And you know, now it's a cutthroat game. Now everybody's getting hit with weapons. Now it's, you know, man, I'm gonna go just walk over there and whack the dude because I don't want to argue with you about who's gonna do it, you know, and the stakes was higher.
Yeah.
And the responsibility was greater. You know, I had leadership positions before, but again, it wasn't a particularly stressful environment. But I realized how unexperienced I was. I was very well educated, but how unexperienced I was when I left that level 3 and went to a level 4, and was like, oh shit, it's different. But I say that to say the schooling still served me well. I was able to navigate that, not because I'd been in that situation a bunch of times. I had never been in that situation, but because I had really studied the schooling and I really took it to heart and I really believed that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like that, I lived and breathed that stuff. At some point I'm gonna read a letter in one of my videos. I basically tried to pull my mom in a letter, right? Like if you read the writing of it, it's ridiculous that I wrote my mom this letter, right? Like this, it would have made a really, really, really good essay in terms of homework, right? But that's all I knew at that point, and I was head over heels for this cause, and so yeah, and it carried me well, and I had to get my status confirmed and stamped a couple different times. You know what I mean? Which I didn't mind, and was always pretty easy because I already had the schooling, right? So it was just a matter of demonstrating that, and my past history had demonstrated, you know, the character part, and so yeah, that stuff. I really did my best to live by it, and did I make mistakes? Sure. In particular in Solano, because again, the examples that we had were not healthy examples.
Yeah.
The only healthy example that ever came through there was Night Owl from Salinas, right? Johnny Angel Martinez. When he came from YA, he's the only person that I knew of to get pulled as a hermano, as a kid. And so he came from YA. He was already a bro. Why he was became pretty clear later, you know, in terms of who his family was and who he was raised around. He was the best example of a bro that I had seen to that point, but he was the odd man out, and it's crazy because he was the youngest, right? But he was schooled right, you know what I mean? In terms of coming up through Salinas and the people he was around, he was schooled right, and he rocked with the program tough, and he didn't allow the toxicity of the environment to.
That's hard. Yeah, that's hard to do.
Right. Whereas many other people came to that yard and did. And that's part of what had some of us first termers hamstrung, because we didn't have no access to nobody else. And here come these other dudes that got X amount of years in the system and everything else, and they're programming and they're functioning. So we're like, okay, you know, but anyways, yeah, man, that stuff served me well, and that was the main thing though for me. It is, and I understand the belonging, right? And I guess to a degree, it was that, right?
Yeah, the Carnalismo, the unit. I mean, like being part of something outside of almost like a secret society in a sense, but having a purpose behind it, and the things that like I can say this, right? The things I learned in the schooling, the indoctrination, and the continued push made me a very more disciplined and better person in the future. There's a lot of good qualities that I gained from being an NR member. You know what I'm saying? Without a doubt.
Absolutely. And I think I was, when I left Solano, I was even more motivated in the sense that I wanted to be the good example, right? I had experienced what it was like to get taken advantage of by homies in Solano, right? I had seen what it was like to have a bandido running the yard, right? I had seen what cowardice dealings and that kind of stuff looked like and the impact that it had and how it impacted the entire yard, you know, people of different mentalities. And I vowed leaving there that I would not be that. I would not be that guy that abuses his authority. I would not be that guy that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths in terms of, damn, what are these people about? Right? I'm not going to be that guy. And I wasn't perfect when I left, you know, by any stretch, but that was my motivation. That's what kept me pushing. You know, it was, again, I just want to be the best homeboy I could be, you know, to be some kind of assistance and at least to not be a detriment, you know, to not be a harm, to not make us look bad, you know, and you know, to a degree at least, you know, I succeeded in that in the limited time that I was on the main line. You know, I don't got nothing to show for it now, right? But I did learn some valuable stuff that like you had said, Toko, and like you said, Flaco, and I've said it a lot of times as well, that helps me out here to be a better person.
Yeah.
Not to be a better homeboy and not to be a better gang member, not to be anything, to be a better human being. And not just better to myself, but better to the people that I come across, you know, and I stopped gangbanging in prison.
Yep. We all did.
Yeah. And for that, I'm thankful, you know. I'm thankful for that. And in a way, it made it easier for me to transition to society on society's terms, you know.
The way it gave you an opportunity to be where you're at today, because you were part of something when you left, that you no longer had to take that with you to the streets. You would let them sit there and say, look, it says it in there. You could go out there and be a citizen. Those are the whole goals. Go out there and retain your citizenship to where you're not on parole and live your life.
You know, Flock, because you've known me, like I'm a stubborn dude in the sense of, like, I'm happy to be told that I'm wrong because it means I'm going to learn something.
Yeah.
But if you're going to tell me that I'm wrong, you got to show me how I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I don't play that whole take my word for it bullshit. Right? Nah, bro. No. Like, if I'm wrong, show me how. What am I misunderstanding? What am I missing? What am I not getting? Right? But just because you don't like it don't mean I'm wrong. You know, maybe that's on you. Right? And for some reason, I don't know where that comes from, but I've been like that throughout my prison time. And so, yeah, coming home, I says right here, strongly encouraged is fine. That's not an obligation, right? I feel strongly encouraged, and no, deuces, right? And so, and it was more respectful than that. Don't get me wrong, but I rest on that stuff, you know, but I had a conversation with Box on a live. I'm gonna post it up as an actual video tomorrow probably, but you know, come to grips with that Norteño label was never mine to own.
Yeah.
You know, I borrowed it, but they own that. You know what I'm saying? The O owns that, the NF owns that. Other people decide whether I'm a homeboy or not according to those parameters. And I reject that. You know, I reject that. I am who I am and I get down how I get down. And I'm thankful for the positive stuff I learned. I'm thankful that I endured the negative stuff without getting my head cut off or getting life in prison or whatever. But I don't care about that label anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't parole that way. I paroled caring about the label. Even though I didn't want to function and I didn't, I cared about my reputation and my dignity and blah, blah, blah. And I was defensive about it. But I lived like a civilian, you know?
So if you live like a civilian, why it's hard to let it affect you.
Right.
That's the whole purpose. I mean, like, you don't, if you're a civilian, you're not supposed to follow. It's just a trip how that works, man. What do you think about you guys, man, personally, man? Do you think the dismantling of the NR was a good idea? What's your guys' opinion on the dismantling part?
I'll leave that one to Toko.
Toko?
Man, I was going on, I think, my third year when the directives came out, right, in '97. And I remember hearing a couple individuals who had big influence that were hermanos were stirring the pot. That was how it got back to me. And we were getting, you heard the grumblings and stuff, man. I think there was rumor, man, we were almost 1,000 strong back then in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas the O was a lot smaller. Yeah. And so, but like you're taught, you don't listen to frivolous talk. You don't listen, this is all back talk, right? And rumors. But when the Wheeler came out, my ego was, I was disappointed. I'm like, man, 3 years, now what? I got to go be like, no, and then the directive came out, but, as far as, I never lost my status as a B. That was always regarded. I was always regarded wherever I went, and, but I think it was, I think personally, because of what came next, I feel personally that it was a mistake. It should have stayed. We were strong.
So I agree with that, man. Because I look at them as, two. The NR wasn't supposed to be no organization, but there's two separate entities working in an alliance. Where one was a movement, one was organization. That's how I used to look at it. It kind of made time easier. When you go to jail, prison nowadays, when we were doing our time, you would still see those OGs in their 40s and 50s that was lacing you up. You know what I'm saying? You don't see that no more. As soon as they made all the different changes and put more expectations upon people, it lost a whole grip of manpower. You know what I mean? With the validation process, the SNY, and then the homeboys changing the program. See, it used to be privileged to be a bro. When you only a bro would get the bonds and formats. You know what I'm saying? And no one, you had to be responsible in the yard, have proper conduct as a North Daniel back then. But at the same token, it gave those that were in our members a feeling of worth that they were part of something. Then when this is revoked and took back, a lot of people felt a certain way. Because there's been people that have been putting it down since like the beginning, first wave in our members. Mousy Von Lerme, Danny Nichols, Negro from Gonzalez, all kinds of dudes have been around for years. You know what I mean? And they still just continue to do their thing. They were humble about it. But I know a lot of other bros felt a certain way about it, man. A lot of people I know that I've talked to years later dropped out just specifically over that. And they've always felt, the ones that told me this, they go, look, all throughout history, and I'm going to say this too, and this is all due respect to all the C's and O's and the O, right? But there's not enough emphasis about what the North Daniels or bros did in the 80s and 90s to establish those yards for North Daniels. Everything goes back to the forefathers, which we have to pay tribute to that. You know what I'm saying? You have to respect that. Sure. But they weren't on the yards in the 80s and 90s. It was a lot of bros and North Daniels that were out there making those sacrifices that were on those yards. It wasn't the Carnales. That's not disrespecting them in any form or fashion. But there needs to be more emphasis on what the NR did, the structure did in the 80s and 90s, because there were some sacrifices, man, that had to be paid. You know what I mean? We all played a pivotal role on those main lines, doing the best that we could to secure, educate, and establish for the people. We were the ones making sacrifices on those yards. We were the ones that were going out to the integrated yards at times back in those days. We were the ones that were getting sent to yards where there's only like 5 homeboys and about 150 oppositions. People forget that. It wasn't, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's the only emphasis in the history. When you get the whole culture breakdown, it needs to include what the NR did at that time, what the structure did, as well as the regular end, the worthy end. Because there was a saying back then, whether you're an Soldado or North Daniel, a North Daniel could be just as worthy because he does things without having an obligation. But back then you had a little separation. You just had 3 different tiers. You know what I mean? And we had names for them back then. Either you were A1, Rascal remembers that, a sympathizer, or you were a fucking straggler. You know what I'm saying? And it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? And that's just the truth of it. But we all still respected each other. These homeboys knew to be up, suited and booted. You know, use a post when you shower, and use the pisser outside, and never be walking alone. And when it's time to get off, let's get off. Those were the HSPs and YPPs that were told to you verbally. There wasn't all this unnecessary paperwork and writings and so forth. Man, the DRs were given verbally. Fucking Rascal would have a fucking a pen, he'd write it on his fucking hand so he could report them. Yeah. It was a lot. It was a lot easier than putting everything on paper and getting validated.
Right. So no, that was the whole point. Put it on your hand, because then you could just lick your hand, wipe it on your pants, and it may not be all the way gone, but it'll be gone enough that it's not legible anymore.
You know, I love the NR movement. I believe it there. The things I learned there, what we were striving for at that time, it was a good thing. Once all these other changes happened, it just kind of felt like a letdown a little bit. You know, you still hold your, your status and so forth, and sometimes could, still obligated. I mean, to step up when you see something wrong and apply your laws in schooling. But I think if they would have kept it how it was, and just put a little bit more checks and balances over it, I think there would have been a lot more success in the long-term game.
So I have mixed feelings because, I never stopped using the word bro.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I got in trouble over that when I went to Pelican Bay, right? And I identified myself as a hermano. I had a C get at me. Don't you ever say that word again, blah, 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 right?
Must have been peanut.
And, and so, yeah, that was it. And that's why I smiled when he got killed, but anyways, I always kept that. What I learned by the disbanding of the NR was that I didn't want to be a C, right? And not that hand was extended to me and I slapped it away. I don't want to be dramatic, right? I had always thought that C's were just like bros on steroids, man, with so much more wisdom and so much more love, right? And just in my mind, they were just these icons, right? Like as if childhood heroes type of thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Like a mythical character almost,
and they must be, man, if this is what we are out here, right? They just must be amazing, right? Yeah. And we're for the people, but man, they're really for the people, and then I learned it was all BS, right? And that it's not about a cause or a struggle or a movement. It's a hyper-capitalist organization that chews people up for financial betterment. And that was a big letdown for me. I was like, Yeah. But that's also when I started realizing there's not a place in this umbrella for bros. That's why there is no more. Because there's no need to try to persuade people so much with this status and stuff, right? It's
that's a good point, bro. I never really, to be honest with you, I never thought about that. That's the God honest truth. That's why
and so it was a sign that there's no room. There's no room for the people. There's no room to be the person that I was striving to be.
Yeah.
Right. And not that I felt like I had made it. Yes, I got pulled. Yes, I was well educated. But that doesn't mean I reached the pinnacle. You know what I'm saying? Like there was always more to learn and more to do, and I was hungry, man. And it's like all that got swiped away, and all that got watered down by this, so-called privileged information becoming basically just public information, right? And no quality control. The flip side of that, though, is, and this is why I say I have mixed feelings on it. there was a lot of bros that were full of shit, man. There's a lot of people that got pulled over favoritism, or they got pulled because somebody was trying to build a wall around themselves, and they abused their authority and they took advantage. And I heard stories about folks sliding bonds underneath people's doors when they didn't even know what it was, and they open it up and read it, and they're like, "Now you're obligated, homie." Like, you know, there was just wild stuff going on, and dramatic abuse, and you know, that goofball Paya that was on the other channel, you know, he became a bro and just started deeming everybody, just ending people's careers. Oh, you're deemed, you're deemed, you're deemed, you're deemed. And I think it's because he was a victim so much when he was younger that he finally got a little bit of power and was like, yeah, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I'll be respected, and became a tyrant, right? For a short amount of time, and you know, that was dealt with. But so in that sense, there was a lot of Northerners who had a strong dislike for bros. And
I remember that too.
I can't blame them either. Like, I don't think their story should be erased. Nope. Right. And so, and the NR did grow too big almost for the NF to control it. And coming to understand as time went on more what the NF was about, yeah, they was never going to let something compete for their attention. You know, they were never going to let something compete for their authority. And so, you know, there's two sides to that, man. A lot of Northerners got abused by bros. A lot of other bros got abused by bros. And some bros got a lot of love from C's, and some bros got abused by C's. And it was just all a mess. But at the end of the day, there was only one group at the top of the food chain. And I think they needed to assert that. They needed to remind everybody, hey, you don't see us. You hear about us. You don't see us. You don't hear from us very often.
We were still running shit.
But we're here, and this is ours. And we will not compete with our own kid, right? Like, we gave birth to you, we could take you out. You know, just like I was told as a child. I brought you into this world, I could take you out. It was funny because the people that said that didn't actually give birth to me, but I believed it anyways when I was a kid. But so it's you know, it's a mixed bag, man. It's a mixed bag. I think it did piss off a lot of people. It did cause a lot of people to leave, but I think because a lot of us realized we ain't that important, man.
Yep.
And not only that, we're not that important, like as if, oh, I thought I was a shit because I was a bro. But you can do all that. You could write you could write hundreds of thousands of words and break stuff down and take this shit serious and do removals and send people to do removals, right? Which there's some weight behind that. You know what I mean? When it's on you to decide the fate of somebody's career, and then it's on you to pick who's going to do it. And when you're talking level 4 yards, everybody's getting whacked, right? And so you can do all of that, and it don't matter. It don't matter.
I agree totally, man.
You're a pawn, and I think hermanos forgot that they were pawns, and started acting like rooks, bishops at least. You know what I mean? Not king and queen, but they started acting out of their role, man. And I think from the NF's eyes, there wasn't that much a difference between bros and Northerners. It's just, you know, the bros was easier to get told what to do because they were closer to you, you know. And
yeah, that's a good point, man. Anyways, guys, we've been on for about an hour. I know it's Friday night. I know you guys got things to do, man. I appreciate both Toko and the Homie Hangout. Subscribe to the Homie Hangout. Check out his content. He always got good stuff on there. And I want to thank you guys for participating tonight.
Well, I appreciate it. We'll catch up soon, guys.
All right, fellas.